today about caucus. Um, I do want to start off by saying thank you to my Vice Chair Steens, for filling in Monday. She got a 2-minute notice that she was going to be doing that. And she went from being a vice chair in her second meeting to chairing the meeting in her second meeting. So she did an excellent job. Thank you so much. I hope the speaker wasn't watching. He probably realizes I'm expendable now. And thank you to the committee for your indulgence. As you can see, though, we are missing a couple of members today. There is a sickness that is just raging through this building, so please take precautions if you're not feeling well. Get with us, and you can always join via WebEx and follow along if you're not feeling well, so we can stop the spread of the sickness in this building. With that, we will open it up for bill introductions. Do I have any bill introductions from the committee? Seeing none. Do I have any from the gallery? Seeing none. And Rich, correct me if I'm wrong, Monday is the last day for committee bill introduction? Monday. So Monday will be the last day for us to introduce committee bills. So if you have any, get them in Monday if you would. We will now move on to our presentation today. We're going to hear about CAPERS, which is the second half of our committee. We have the banking and credit union side, and we also have the CAPERS side. So joining us today is Alan Conroy with CAPERS, and I believe he has Jared with him as well. We were introduced. But Alan, welcome to the committee, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee. Certainly a pleasure to be here. And as you mentioned, Jared Waltner is our planning and research officer and does a great job and provides lots of good information as well. And then we have one of our trustees, Ernie Claudel, here in the second row, is a CAPERS trustee and is one of the elected members of the board. Certainly a pleasure to be here, and I've got a lot of information here. Some of you may have heard it before, some of you maybe not, but I'm going to go through it at a pretty good clip. But however the chair would like to proceed with questions, certainly willing to go however you'd like to proceed. But of course, we're around and certainly respond to, if you have questions that don't get answered today or later on, don't hesitate to contact me. On the very first slide there is just my contact information, so my desk phone, my cell phone, and my email. Please don't ever hesitate to reach out to me, and we'll do our best to get right back to you. Today we're just going to talk a little bit about CAPERS, briefly about the Board of Trustees, about the CAPERS membership, and then spend maybe most of the time on CAPERS benefits and CAPERS funding. Just in terms of just a little bit about CAPERS, and just to remind you, we're a staff of over 100, and we administer then those defined benefit plans for public employees. There's 3 plans under that CAPERS umbrella. There's the regular CAPERS system, there's police and fire for public safety, and then there's retirement system for judges. And we partner with over 1,500 employers around the state. Of course, the state of Kansas, all the school districts are affiliated with CAPERS. All the counties are affiliated with CAPERS. Almost all the cities are. City of Wichita would be probably the biggest exception, since they're large enough. They have their own retirement system. And then you get into all those special purpose districts or units like community colleges, drainage districts, townships, public library boards, conservation districts, on down the list. So touches a lot of lives. Literally 1 in every 10 Kansans has a direct connection to CAPERS. So we have a lot of people counting on us, and certainly we want to be there for them. Here's just the kind of the general contact information. There's a toll-free number, and I think sometimes as you might get constituent inquiries about CAPERS, of course, we're glad to provide information for you, or if you want to send them over either to me directly, or there's just some general contact information. Again, we're always glad to help with that. Just in terms of how CAPERS works, it's basically, I think, pretty straightforward. It's in terms of you, the legislature, you define the benefits, you provide the funding. The employers then make those employer contributions on behalf of their members. The members contribute the money. We take it, invest it, and of course pay the benefits when it's time. Just in terms of the administration, not only is there the regular CAPER system, but just might point out there's the death and disability program for active members. There's a CAPERS 457 deferred comp program where that's, you may be familiar with deferred comp, but anyway, it's all basically all employee money. It's a separate trust fund. There's about $1.6 billion in that. And then we have a third-party plan administrator, Empower is their name, and they then work with those members that contribute to that CAPERS 457. And then also recently, we have some money from the state treasurer, the unclaimed property fund. It's just recently been restarted, but basically that unclaimed property fund, the balance in that's pretty healthy. I think more than the treasurer thinks would ever need to be paid out on a regular basis as people claim that unclaimed property, or maybe the beneficiaries of it do. And so the decision was made quite a number of years ago that part of that money would come to CAPERS. We would invest it. The treasurer's unclaimed property by statute, what they can invest in is very safe, but also means, of course, a low return. And so it's kind of like bonds, which really aren't doing too bad these days, but they're limited in terms of their investment opportunities. And so the thinking is the money comes to CAPERS, we can invest it, get a higher return, and then return that money back to eventually, I think most of it goes back to the state general fund. Just point out that the CAPERS trust fund, so it's a trust fund, does not, we don't get a direct state general fund appropriation. So all the expenses, all the benefits come out of the trust fund. As you might expect, and our administrative expenses are about 1.4% in terms of total benefits and 0.1% as we looked at to assets. This is just a little bit by the numbers, just as we look, and I always like to say, we're over on good old Kansas Avenue, across from Evergy Plaza, between the closed Wolf's Camera Store and the closed Schlotsky store. That's the CAPERS building between that. It was an IBM building originally, and of course, eventually they had other plans and changed their service model, and eventually CAPERS bought it. So it's part of the real estate trust that we are part of our real estate investments, and all the CAPERS members own a piece of that building as one of our investments. But just the magnitude or the size of the things we do. So we send out 1.4 million retirement benefit payments each year, and that we send out over $2.2 billion with a B. So again, a lot of money goes out. A lot of people are counting on us to send it out. We pay out about $34 million in life insurance benefits, about $14 million to those. We have about 1,600 disabled employees, have about 5,000 people that, in terms of retirement applications. We have about 38,000 people that either join the system, so join public service, or maybe switch. Maybe they go from the state to the county or something like that. So there's lots of transfers. And then we have over 44,000 beneficiary designations that are processed. So of course, as life unfolds, those beneficiary designations change. We have over 10,000 people withdraw their contributions, handle over 100,000 calls each year on our call center, and we get over 25,000 emails. This is just major milestones. I won't go through it all, but just CAPERS started in 61. In 71, this Kansas school retirement system for teachers, the decision was made to merge with CAPERS then. So 10 years after CAPERS started, the school employees came. And just there at the bottom, in 1993, there were significant benefit enhancements granted at that time by the legislature. And we'll talk more as we get to funding. But in 2009, CAPERS 2 was created, I think in part to address funding issues at the time. And then in 2015, CAPERS 3 was opened also to address funding issues at the time. and there's lots of words there, but just point out, and we'll talk more, the legislature issued some pension obligation bonds and provided some other funding to help improve the overall funded status of the trust fund. Just in terms of the KPERS trustees, so they are all fiduciaries to the trust fund, which just, of course, means all their action, there's that moral, legal, ethical standard that they have to do. Everything they do has to be framed on what's best for the members. So it's not partisan politics, it's not economic development, it's what's best for the members. And of those nine trustees, 4 are appointed by the governor, subject to Senate confirmation. One's appointed by the President of the Senate, one by the Speaker of the House. 2 of the members are elected, one on the school side, one on the non-school side. And Trustee Claudel is, of course, from the school side. And then the state treasurer, by virtue of the office, is automatically a KPERS member. And this just lists them out in their appointing authority. I just point out kind of in the middle of the page, Rich Prail from Parsons, a retired banker and a retired legislator, was just recently appointed by the Speaker. So he's our newest trustee to join the board. As we look, so the legislature then really has delegated the administration of the trust fund to the board. So it's their responsibility, of course, to appoint, for example, my position, work with the actuary, work with outside investment counsel, and develop any rules and regs, and just the overall kind of structure then that the staff operates, certainly under the guidance and the direction of the board. Changing gears in a little bit to KPERS members. This one there's over 330,000 active, retired, and inactive members. About 154,000 are active members. Those active members range in age from 16, our youngest KPERS member, to our current oldest active member is 91. And I always say, so that gives you something to shoot for if you want to see if you can still be in the legislature when you're 91. That would be a good goal. We do know the 91-year-old happens to be a school employee. We don't keep track of their job descriptions, but I always say we know, and it's a woman, that she's not a school bus driver, but more than likely she works either in the cafeteria or might be a para in a classroom. And you can see there the pie chart on the left, the largest group are those school employees. Over half of the active members are KPERS school members, so over 87,000. And you can see the breakdown there between state. Local is the second largest in the state, police and fire and judges. In terms of those subgroups within KPERS, KPERS 1, there's about 43,000 there. So that'd be membership before 2009. KPERS 2, about 23,000. That's between membership dates between 2009 and 2015. And then the largest group now, KPERS 3, almost 80,000 since 2015. And so we'll talk about it. You can just see there, just the average KPERS members. And of course, they're all, none of our members are average. But if the average number-wise, the KPERS member has about 10 years of service, their average salary would be about $51,000 a year. Police and fire, also about 10 years, average salary about 80, and then judges, 9.3 years with an average salary of $127,000. This busy pie chart here just shows, and it's color-coded, so the large blue part, that'd be the KPERS 3 members. Let's see, the green is KPERS 1, and then the other is KPNF judges, and then this KPERS 2 is kind of the purple there. You can see, of course, as you'd expect, KPERS 3, newest group since 2015, they'd be on generally younger. The KPERS 1 members, more to the right, and you can see the average age there, the biggest groups, about 50 to 60 in that for KPERS 1. And then there's that active member for 90, that's 91. On the years of service, again, KPERS 3, the blue part on the right-hand graph there, since it's only been in place since 2015, Most of those members, of course, have less than 5 years or 5 to 10 years, and then on across the chart. We do, just in terms of capers, regular capers, there's no, mandatory retirement age that people have to leave service at regular capers. And so our current longest serving active member has 56 years of service and is a state employee. Might be for the Department of Transportation. They have a lot of longevity there in that fine agency. But yeah, 56 years of service be another goal you could set for 56 years of service in the State House. That'd be. As we look to retired members, just a little bit of information there. 116,000 retired members and their beneficiaries range in age from 50 to 109. The beneficiaries 15 to 107. And you can see kind of the average there. The retirement benefits about $16,800 a year, so about $1,400 a month for regular capers, about $43,000 a year for police and fire, and about $48,000 for judges. 88% of the retirement benefits are paid to Kansas addresses. So once a person retires, more than likely the vast majority of them remain here in Kansas, and those retirement dollars stay here in Kansas. Some of you may have remembered this question before. Just a little quiz in terms of, so if they don't live in Kansas, where would you think would be the next highest state of where our retirees reside? It's not Kansas, it might be, anybody guess? Missouri, that's right, Missouri, and then Oklahoma, and then Texas, and then Arizona, and Florida's not far behind. But and we even have a few that live abroad as well. But you can see out of the retirees, and as you'd expect, the school group is the largest. Over half of those school members belong to Capers School. Just for your information here, there's one chart here by county of the number of retirees by county. And so you can kind of see maybe and look at your respective county. And of course, the darker the shading means there's more retirees that reside in that county. You should expect perhaps maybe Johnson County has the highest, followed by Sedgwick, and Shawnee's not far behind. The next one is just those average monthly retirement benefits of the retirees. Again, the darker the shading, the higher the average is. And again, you can see that Johnson and Douglas and Pratt counties certainly have the highest average of those monthly retirement benefits. Then as we switch gears on the benefit side, so Capers is a qualified, they call it a 401A defined benefit plan under the IRS code. And that's important that we stay square with the IRS, because then that helps us in terms of the tax treatment of Capers and the retirement benefits. And so that's certainly a thing to remain a qualified trust. We want to keep square with the requirements of the IRS. And part of that comes to the being a qualified plan does give our members certain tax advantages. For example, the member contributions are picked up and excluded from taxable income for federal income taxes, but then the member pays it once they do retire. And so a lot of times when we're talking about legislation, we'll may comment that the legislation, of course, the legislature can do whatever you'd like, but how it squares with the current IRS regulations. Again, those three retirement plans, the state schools, of course, the largest, 316,000 active. Again, state, local, and school, almost all the employers then are within that group. 1,100 employers are there. On police and fire then, again, it's all those public safety people, 116 local employers, about 16,000 active, and the judges, those are all state judges, so magistrate judges, district court judges, appellate court judges, and court of appeals judges are the only ones that are eligible to belong to the state judges retirement system. Just in terms of plan design changes, again, Capers 1 prior to July 1st of 2009, so that's a closed group. So nobody else is currently joining Capers 1. Capers 2 was between 2009 and 2014 at the end of the year. And so again, and that was part of pension reform, and we'll talk about funding, but that was one of the creations to help address funding issues at that time. The only group that can still affiliate with Capers 2 would be correctional officers. So a correctional officer, state correctional officer who's hired today, that person would be enrolled in Capers 2. Everybody else that would join today would be in Capers 3. And so that's any new employees after January 1st of 2015. And then Capers, KPNF, there's 2 tiers, but almost all the members are in Capers Tier 2, which is membership since 2000 or 1989. Just in terms of a public pension plan then, of course, you know, the way it works, as I mentioned, the funds that go into the trust fund, contributions from the employee and the employer, and those investment earnings. Again, as a defined contribution plan, they're guaranteed a lifetime benefit. For Capers 1 and Capers 2, that's the true, or I guess the traditional pension formula, where years of service times that final average salary times a multiplier, we can tell the member exactly what their lifetime retirement benefit will be if we have those that information or assumptions like that. Capers 3 is a hybrid. They call it a cash balance plan. By IRS regulations, it's still a defined benefit plan, but it has a different structure, and we'll talk more about that. And of course, almost all the Capers members receive Social Security. For example, some of the public safety ones do not. The decision was made way back in the 60s and 70s, for example, that state troopers, KBI agents, they are not affiliated with Social Security. And that's part of the benefit structure in police and fire as well. Just contributions in, the employees pay that, there's a statutory contribution rate, it's 6% for all the Capers members and judges. Police and fire, it's at 7.15%. The employers contribute, and it fluctuates, because again, under defined benefit plan, as the investment earnings go up and down, it's the employers on the hook to pay the shortfall. So because the employees pay there, we invest the money as best we can, and whatever's short, it falls to the employer in a defined benefit plan to make up that difference. And so for state school, 11.54%, Capers locals 9.7%, KPNF is over 23%, and judges a little over 21%. Just in terms of the budget though, state budget, over just those contributions that come in for, that the state pays on behalf of state employees. And again, the state pays those employer contributions for all local school employees as part of state aid to education. So that's over $650 million annually the state pays into the trust fund for employer contributions. Capers 3, there's some pay credit things, which makes it a little different. It gets down to the individual account. Those pay credits that credited from the employer, it's 3 to 6% based on years of service. Just real briefly here on Capers 1, that's that defined, again, that traditional defined benefit plan. The multiplier currently is 1.85% at years of service. Final average salary, that final average salary is the 3 highest years of salary if they have membership before 1993. Vesting after 5 years, which means they're guaranteed a lifetime benefit once they are eligible for that. The normal retirement dates for Capers 1 is age 62 with 10 years, age 65 with 1, and an 85-point plan, which is just the combination of years in service. Once a person gets to 85 points, regardless of their age, under Capers 1, they're eligible for normal retirement. And there's just a calculation there, $60,000 final average salary, 20 years of service, benefit would be about a little over $21,000 a year. 30 years, same assumptions, that'd be a little over $32,000 a year. Capers 2, very similar. Again, it's 2009 to 2015. Final average salary, years of service. The multiplier there in Capers 2 is 1.85% for all years of service. Back in Capers 1, for some of those years were at 1.75 before it was switched to the 1.85. At 5 years of vesting, guaranteed lifetime benefit after 5s. But the normal retirement age for Capers 2 members, age 60 with 30 or age 65 with 5 years, but there's no 85-point plan. So that was the big change, in part for funding reasons, to not provide that 85-point plan option for the Capers 2 members. Then as we get to Capers 3, again, this cash balance plan, and it does have some characteristics of like a 401k plan, which you might be familiar with maybe in your own part of the world. It's technically a defined benefit plan, but it's based, they call it a career average benefit rather than those highest years of salary like a traditional defined benefit plan in Capers 1 and 2. And one of the reasons the cash balance plan is certainly different is there's risk sharing between the employee and the employer. As I mentioned here a minute ago, Capers 1 and Capers 2, the risk, if the investment earnings aren't there, falls to the employer. Capers 3, there's some sharing there in that risk. And so, that's part of that design plan for Capers 3. Cash balance plans, though, are designed to reward members who join earlier in their careers, have lots of years to accrue service and interest, because again, we're taking their money and investing it, and when they get ready to retire, that's what gets converted. Lots of discussion about the adequacy of Capers 3, and certainly glad to have that discussion whenever you would like, but certainly three things to remember about the current Capers 3 structure I think are important, because a lot of times it's compared to a 401k. Capers 3 members, one, never lose anything they put into the system. So once they're fully vested, they're going to get that benefit. So they never lose their contributions, their interest that they pay into Capers 3. Also, they're guaranteed on their earnings, on their investments, in their notational account, as it's called, guaranteed at least 4% every year. And there's an opportunity if the trust fund does well, there's some adjustments that can increase that guarantee or share on the upside, not on the downside. And then again, it's unlike a 401k, a Capers 3 benefit is guaranteed for life. So sometimes like 401ks, once a person gets ready to retire, whatever they've amassed in their 401k account and the market's doing well, it could be a great time to retire. If the market's down, maybe they decide to keep working. But again, or at some point, if they live a long time, do they ever exhaust their contributions in their 401k? Capers 3, that will never happen. It's a guaranteed lifetime benefit. This is just kind of a busy chart, but the employees contribute 6%. They earn credits then towards their retirement. They get that interest, at least 4%. Again, they're vested after 5 years of service. The pay credits of the employer that go into this notational account, the only way the member can get that, though, is if they retire, not if they would withdraw. So when they get ready to retire, we take their notational account, so that's what they've paid in, plus their interest earnings, plus the pay credits from the employer, and then we annuitize that into a guaranteed lifetime benefit. And so this then just shows you police and fire, then again, kind of the traditional defined benefit plan, but their multiplier is 2.5%. The decision was made in public safety that there's public benefit to have a young, vigorous workforce. And so the opportunities for earlier retirement at age 50 with 25 years of service, age 55 with 20, or age 60 with 15 years of service. And you can see the benefit structure They're at $75,000 after 20 years. The benefit would be $37,500. And again, they may or may not be eligible for Social Security depending on the decision of their employer, quite a number of years ago. And then there's the 30-year calculation, about $56,000 based on 30 years of service. Judges, also a traditional defined benefit plan, but they're, rather than, well, not that they aren't young and vigorous, but police, public safety, they wanted that young, vigorous workforce. The policymakers, when judges system was created, the assumption was that these individuals would join the bench later towards the end of their legal career. And so, their opportunity to earn a retirement benefit, the structure takes that into account. Their multiplier is 3.5%. They're immediately vested. They still have the 85-point plan and 62 and 10 and 65 and 1. It is capped at 70% after 20 years of service, and you can see the examples there of $100,000. The benefit after 10 years of service would be $35,000. Lifetime benefit after 20 years, and because the way the multiplier works, it'd be a $70,000 a year lifetime benefit. Just mention one of the other benefits then, death and disability program there, that's 100% employer funded. They pay 1%, the employer does, whether it's city, county, state. They contribute 1% of the payroll contribution to CAPERS. There, if a person becomes disabled, the first 24 months, they can qualify. There's a benefit waiting period of 180 days, but to get that disability, it means they can't perform their regular occupation that they were doing at the time they were disabled. And then after, if they're unable to perform any occupation after another 24 months, then they're entitled to that benefit, and there's some max there. Would mention just at the bottom of the page there, the 24 legislature did increase the CAPERS death benefit. It had been at $4,000 for decades, but it was increased to $6,000 to $6,000 from $4,000. And if you can hang with me to the last subject here, funding. See, it's even getting more exciting as we go. Funding, again, that's those member contributions. CAPERS, regular CAPERS members, judges contribute that 6%. Police and fire, 7.15. Employer contributes whatever's actuarially needed. And then investments then, again, by statute, we're held at the prudent expert standard of care, which is kind of the highest one you can be. So no, just like state economic development things, that again, it's what's the best for our members. Just in terms of those contributions, again, the employer contributions, then state, local, school, it's over $1 billion that comes in. Member contributions, about $500 million. Again, you can see the rates there. Those employer contributions then are at that actuarially required rate to fund the benefits, and we talked about that. As we look at the investment policy then, is that prudent expert standard care. Of course, we have statements of policy and objectives and guidelines that then serve those broad investment objectives to serve our members, that prudent expert standard. And so in the latest valuation there, the assets then in 2000, they were at $9.8 billion. At the end of the calendar year last year, at 2024, they were just at almost $28 billion. Our 20-year return is 7.3%. The board has set a policy or a target of a 7% return, and that's what the actuary uses as she's calculating, like, let's say, benefit changes. It assumes that we'll get that 7% each year. Or some years we make it, some we don't. We've got a chart in just a second here on that. In terms of managing, we have a small internal investment staff, but we have fund managers that then manage the fund on a daily basis, so $28 billion. We have 34 external investment managers. We have 90 private equity funds that we're invested in. And then our internal investment professionals, we have about 9 of those, and that's to keep track of all these investment managers to make sure they're carrying out the direction that the board has set for those respective investments. When you have over $28 billion, you're able to attract some very favorable rates from those investment managers. And so the investment fees then on $28 billion, it's 0.336%. So not even 0.5% on the assets to those fund managers earn. And so it's a very favorable rate, of course, perhaps as compared to some retail investment rates. Just in terms of our investment allocation, every 3 years the board does an asset liability study to look at that asset allocation. And on the right-hand page, you can see that graph where about 47% now is the long-term target allocation for equities or stocks between the U.S. and international. We have, of course, some U.S. treasuries. We have high-yield corporate bonds, mortgage credit, physical assets such as timber and infrastructure, real estate, and on down the list. And so, the overall goal of the trust fund that's set by the board that our staff tries then to make sure our fund managers is, of course, the highest return for the least amount of risk. And so, of course, with the public pension plan, we're investing for the long term. So we know 30, 40, 50 years out, the trust fund has to be there to pay those hard-earned public servants that have done their share. This just shows investment performance. Roughly over half of the money to the trust fund comes from those investments, about 1/3 from the employers, and then the balance from members. And our calendar year return is 9.3%. The fiscal year return is 9.7%. In the bottom right there, you can see that dotted line is that assumed rate of return, the 7%. And you can see 1 year we beat it, 5 year we beat it, 10 year we barely beat it, 20 year we beat it, but the 3-year return we did not. We were at 3.99%. Again, as measuring any of these returns, what period of time you pick can certainly make a big difference. This is just a little longer return on those returns going back to 2005 through 2024. Then again, the dotted line is that assumed rate of return. You can see that you may remember the big downturn in 2008 and 2009 where the trust fund lost almost 20% in 1 year. But then you can see some very good years, 2011 when it rebounded up 22%, 2021, a 26% return. And I wish the trust fund could have that every year. Of course, we know that's not going to happen. But I think the point here is just that some years we're going to beat it, some years we're not. It's how we're doing directionally, how are we doing over the long haul in terms of returns. The funded ratio, and that's just assets to liabilities. Right now, our latest valuation, we get an actuarial valuation every year. We're right at, for the whole trust fund, we're at 74% funded. And so, and then for just the state school group, we're a little over 75% funded. The goal, of course, is ultimately to be at 100% funded, but at a minimum, you want to be over 80% funded. So whenever that next big downturn in the market comes, and one of these days it will come, here recently it's seemed like, only going up generally, maybe not in the last couple of days, but generally up. And so you want to have that funded ratio in the strongest position to weather then the downturn once it might, probably not if it comes, it's when it comes, whenever that may be. Slide 43, again, is a busy chart, but just to point out, so back in 1993, we were 82% funded. And our assets then were about $5.5 billion. And that little blue sliver then is that unfunded actuarial liability. Well, you can see lots of things happen, big downturn in the market. There were 25 years where the employer, for example, the state, and again, pays the contribution for not only all state employees, but all local school employees. There were 25 years where the decision was made for state budget difficulties. The actuary would say, okay, you need to contribute here. And for 25 years, the decision made was to contribute something less than that. Always paid something and a fair amount, but there was that shortfall. Well, that shortfall doesn't go away. It rolls to the CAPER's unfunded actuarial liability. We're assuming, in effect, sort of charging that 7% assumed rate of return. So you can see in 2012, it got down to that funded ratio, assets to liabilities of 56%. And that, again, I always say, that's when the red flags go up, the red lights are flashing, somebody better do something, because the difficulty is if you're at 56% and you have another major downturn in the economy, that could drag that number down considerably. And at some point, that funding ratio gets too low, you just can't invest your way out of it, and then you're in a tough spot. But to the credit of the legislature, the policymakers, the governors, you can see that that funded ratio line is increasing. Again, for the system now, we're at 74%, which is a lot of progress. The last 7 years, the policymakers have made the decision to pay the actuarially required rate. So those 25 years of paying less than what you're supposed to, that has not happened. And that's probably really the key to long-term adequate funding of the system to pay the employers to pay what they're supposed to have. Also in that low point, that's when the decision was made to create CAPERS 3. So by plan design, it is a cheaper, less expensive system for the employer. And so that helps that fund ratio. And of course, we've had some good investment runs since 2012, some ups and downs, but certainly made a lot of progress there. But paying, the employer paying what they're supposed to, again, that's probably the biggest key to long-term funding. So just kind of on wrapping up funding then, that funded ratio increasing, that was good. We're for now hitting that 7% target, paying what the employer paying what they're supposed to. And again, at $28 billion, we have a well-diversified fund. I think we're in a strong position should, whenever that next downturn comes, to weather that. So a lot of information. Appreciate your attention, but certainly, Chair, be glad to respond to questions as appropriate.
Alan, thank you for that. And committee, I can assure you this is a very 3,000-foot look and view of CAPERS. If you want, Alan would go into great detail on many mechanisms within this. So feel free to ask any questions that you have of Alan while we have him here. I believe Representative Poskin, you have your first one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here today. My question has to do with the fact that our corrections are in CAPERS 2, and I'm wondering if you could go over the history of how that happened and was it statutory, so forth, because as you know, there's great interest in adding teachers to CAPERS 2.
Yes, there was, and it is statutory that they were carved out for special treatment. I think at the time, if my memory serves me correctly, and no guarantee there, but I believe it was the time, very difficult time within the correctional system. Some correctional guards had been actually killed, a lot of unrest, and of course, with all that, so they were trying to, in terms of recruitment and retention of correctional officers. Back at that time, there was discussion of moving them all the way to police and fire, but the decision was made at the time that maybe that, and probably more financial, that moving them to KPNF was probably too expensive. And so, but they wanted some acknowledgement that doing special public service, and also trying to help with retention, I think, of correctional officers, and of course still a challenge these days. But I think that all those kind of factor together to keep the CAPERS 2 group open just for correctional officers.
Representative Sweeley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Director, for joining us today. I just had a question on, you look at 2008 to 2009, the drop, and then you look in COVID and, the drop after that. What have we put in place to just kind of minimize that if we start to get into kind of double-digit losses or anything like that?
Right, great question. And I think part of that is that asset allocation study, again, trying to minimize risk and try to be well diversified. So, with roughly a little less than half in the equity market, when that comes, if that downturns there, those other diversified investments, whether it's timber, or real estate, or bonds, corporate debt, all those, hope is would help minimize some of that. But again, as you pointed out, there's some years that downturn is so large that diversification can't weather that big a hit.
Obviously, you can't stop all of it, but thank you for the answer, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Rivas?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And thanks a lot for the presentation. So I'm going to ask a question that I get from constituents like fairly often. I have a lot of friends that are retired teachers and things, and I hear about this. So the state was sitting on $4 billion as of last year. And so the question is, so what if we would just throw $1 billion at Capers to change this allocation, or 500 million, or whatever the magic number is? And so I'm going to get this on Saturday to coffee. So I've got to ask this question.
And Alan, if I can interrupt real quick, if you could quickly actually go over what we did a few years ago, plus the bonding that we've done in regard to the Capers and the unfunded liability as well.
Thank you. I think if we can go back to slide 9, maybe some help we can get back there. Just a couple different things that have happened through the years. One of them, the legislature in 2003, let's see, in 2015 and in 2021 issued pension obligation bonds where the state sold bonds and their state is paying the debt service. Our only part was, and their 30-year bonds, our only part was that we got the proceeds with it. And so the decision was made, and that's selling bonds, not just paying, but the decision was made then, the assumption was it's just interest arbitrage. So the assumption was that whatever interest the bondholders are going to be paid from the state for the bonds, it's going to be less than what we could earn in the trust fund if we had the money, and it's worked very well. In the time, these 3 bonds were to the good after debt service over $1 billion. So that has worked, but again, they're 30-year bonds, so there's still some years quite to play out. The legislature did also then, maybe to your point, just provided additional funding into the trust fund to pay down that unfunded liability. And so in 2022, for example, there was $1.1 billion that was paid to Capers, and it was over kind of spread over a few months, but over less than a year. But so that just went into the trust fund. We had it to invest, lowered the unfunded liability. And if you lower the unfunded liability, it lowers that employer contribution because that funded ratio is better. So just for example, on, let's say, your question, if you'd like to write a check, send $1 billion over to Capers, of course, we'd be glad to accept it. But that $1 billion, that would improve that funded ratio by almost 4%. So we're at 75%, it's 3.8. So it would get us almost, and maybe with the strong investment earnings in the current valuation, it conceivably might get us either over 80% or close to 80%. But the assumption is a 3.8% increase in the funded ratio. And then that lowering the employer contributions, it would save you collectively about $72 million a year in lower employer contributions to Capers for the state school, state's paying it, because the funded ratio is stronger. And so again, when the actuary does that calculation of how much the employer should pay, it would be $72 million a year less. So over 5 years, of course, all the assumptions being achieved, it would save almost $400 million in employer contributions over 5 years. But yeah, it's certainly helped the 3 times it's been done, where cash comes in and it goes directly to pay off that outstanding obligation of the state. It's a debt of the state. Of course, it's being paid off, but it saves on interest and helps the funded ratio of Capers. Long answer. I hope that helps.
Is that satisfactory, Representative? Okay. Yeah, and we have those discussions every year on, can we find more money to stick to help pay down the unfunded liability? I think with the budget profile that we're facing though, and the crunch we're facing in the next few years, that's not something we're gonna be able to achieve currently. But it is still something that we try to be cognizant of. Committee, any other questions for Alan? Representative Bohai.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Briefly, several years ago, I worked for a I worked for a pension administration firm, and the defined benefit plans were basically going by the wayside. So it's my very lay understanding that this cash balance defined benefit plan being a hybrid was one of the probably best things that we could do in order to continue to have a defined benefit plan when it started. I know a lot of people want to move from 3 to 2. I don't even know what the fiscal note on that looks like, but trending across the country, sorry for my lead-in, trending across the country, where are we at as far as we're still doing a defined benefit plan? Are all states still doing that? Are some of the states moving more towards the hybrid? I don't know if that.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. There is a mix. Some states have gone to like a 401k type plan, of course, and there's some that have done a cash balance plan, like here in Kansas. I'd say the majority certainly are still defined benefit plans, and we can get you the exact number of, but I'd say, I'm just guessing here, maybe 2/3, 3/4 would probably be in still the traditional defined benefit plan, and then the balance either like a 401k or cash balance. Nebraska has a cash balance plan. They've had one for a long time.
Coach?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Conroy, Jared, thank you for being here. A lot of teachers are retiring. And if they continue to work, I believe they make 80% of their salary. Do they have to pay into capers if they're making 80% of their salary?
There's no earnings limitation on the member, so a person can retire. There is a waiting period working after retirement, and some people call it the capers penalty. We think that's such a harsh term. We always talk about an assessment, but the employer, the employer pays it. Now, some, for example, school districts, if they hire back a capers retiree, they may lower the capers retiree salary when they come back to pay that assessment or penalty. But there's no earnings limitation on the member themselves. And of course, they could retire from the public sector one day and, next Monday go to work on the private sector, and there's no limitation. So there's no earnings limit in the public sector, only if they go back to work. Well, again, they don't pay it. It's the employer pays it. There's that waiting period. No limitation. It's no limitation on what they earn, even if they come back to work or if they go to work for the public sector. They still get their benefit and then what they might earn in their job.
Do you remember, is that waiting period 6 months or?
It depends on how long, the age of the member. So if they're less 62 and less, it's 180 days. 65 and over, then it's a 60-day waiting period, if I get that right, yeah. So 60-day waiting period.
One last question, the death benefit, $6,000, you have to be an active member to get that?
No, that's just for capers retirees. So they can designate who that goes to. Some people, they can even designate it to a funeral home to help, and so it goes directly to the funeral home. Whoever receives it does have to pay taxes on it. And so that's why some people send it directly, have it go directly to the funeral home. So the funeral home has to pay the taxes on it.
Thank you, Mr. Conroy. Thank you, Mr.
Any further questions, committee? Vice Chair Steens.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was looking for that slide, but just to clarify, you were saying in Capers 3, if you take that money out, right, it's yours. So whatever is, your balance is, and you're paying no penalty on that. Is that correct? Or do you have to roll it over into something kind of like a 401k?
qualified 401K type plan, then it goes directly and there's no taxes paid at that time, and they pay taxes when they withdrew it out of the 401K.
Committee, any further questions? Seeing none. Alan, quick, what is our projected payoff when we're gonna hit 100% funding?
2039.
2039. How often do you guys look at the assumed rate of return?
It's periodically and probably and actually, statutorily, it has to be looked at every 3 to 5 years, so it's kind of depends on what's going on, but the last one was after 4 years, 3 years. The last one we did was after 4 years. But yeah, the board, working with the actuary, but I'd say, yeah, generally be after every 4 years, that assumption would be examined again.
Are we coming up on that?
We've got at least a couple more years, I think. Yeah, 3 more years, because it was
Oh, you
the
guys
year
are-
before last, yeah.
Okay, awesome. Committee, last call for questions? Seeing none. Thank you so much, Alan, for
your
being here
time.
today. Guys, committee, I will not underemphasize this at all. Like, Alan is probably one of the hardest workers we have here. I email Alan Saturday night about 9 o'clock. Probably had a whiskey or two, but I'll email Alan something expecting an email response Monday morning. By 9:30, he's got the answer for me on a Saturday night. So I emailed him this morning on something. 10 minutes later, I'm sure he's walking over here when he emailed me back and gave me the answer I needed. So Alan and his team do a great job. They've done a great job handling capers through all the ups and downs that we've had the last decade and a half. So thank you, Alan, to you and your team for all the hard work you guys are doing. Committee, just a couple of notes. I actually do need to reopen bill introductions because I do have a bill introduction. It's going to be 25 RS 0863, and this deals with TEFI. We heard some stuff from the banking commissioner the other day on that topic, and a report from the interim committee. So again, that RS number is 25 RS 0863. Next week, I am planning we're going to start bill hearings. Monday, I'm planning on hearing the public funds bill that I read in the RS number here last week. Unfortunately, I do not have a bill number for that yet. We should get that today on the House floor. So as soon as we get that bill number, I will get it out to you guys. It should be read in. I plan on hearing that bill Monday. It is a pretty big bill. I assume it's 60 to 80 pages. So definitely get a head start looking into that. And then Wednesday, no, not at all. Wednesday, I want to start getting into capers bills too. We're going to hear 3 capers bills. I do not have those numbers with me. Actually, yes, I do. HB 2086, HB 2129, and HB 2130. We're going to hear those 3 capers bills Wednesday. What we're actually going to do is just do one big bill hearing on all 3 of those capers bills at once, just to save some time. So that's the agenda and the plan as of now for next week. Of course, things change, so be flexible. But as of now, that's what we're going to plan on doing. Committee have anything else for the good of the committee? Seeing none, we are adjourned, and we'll see you Monday.